Guardsman. We're being hunted. Look, right there in the trees.
Guardsman.
I see you. Guardsman, look. Over there on the ground. If it bleeds, we can kill it. It's time for some catch-a-can tactics. Today, Guardsmen, we're hunting. We are going to hunt the predator orc. Let's get started. Step 1. We want to base all the skin in Castilian green. Now, I did prime this in Mechanicus Standard Gray Rattle Can. For the skin, you want to make sure it doesn't go on too thick, so you might just want to water down the paint just slightly. Step 2, we're going to use Elysian Green. You want to water this down just slightly until it's like an ink-like substance. And what you're going to do is that you're just going to glaze it over the front half of the body. Now, you just want to leave the creases alone, so you just kind of want to do like on those muscle areas that are protruding out. You want to leave those areas darker. We're going to try to make this look like the actual predator from the movie, but as a green orc. We are now going to mix equal parts Ushabti bone with Elysian green, which is the color that we just used. We want to make sure that's all mixed good and up. And you're going to want to make sure that it's just slightly watered down until it's an ink-like substance. And you want to get that excess paint off just using a paper towel. And all we're going to do is that we're just going to enforce those highlights even more on only the front half of the body. So we're just going to do on those protruding muscle areas, staying away from the creases. It doesn't need to be perfect because later on we're going to wash it. So it's going to get darker, but this is going to help blend in some natural highlights. And then when we do highlights later on, it's going to blend it nicer. Next, we're going to use Iron Warriors for the choppa or the sword. We're also going to paint the killer claw and the face mask, as well as all of those chains that are on the head. Now, I also just painted the entire thing just because it was easier, but we're going to later paint that black. And I also did all of the armor plates. Iron Warriors is going to work really great for this because it's going to be really dark, and the contrast with the bright silver is going to look really good later on. We are going to use contrast black Templars or Abaddon black. It really doesn't matter. And we're just going to paint the coils that are connecting to the head. I still left all of those chains in Iron Warriors. We are going to mix about 2/3 Emperor's Children to 1/3 Elysian Green. And we're going to paint that kind of gummy area where the teeth are, as well as the entire inside of the mouth. I also end up painting the very roof of the mouth, like that area. all black with contrast black Templar, and then I use Mephiston red and I just cover that black area up. This is just so that it's darker on the roof of the mouth and brighter kind of where that tongue and kind of bottom gummy area is. For the leather, we are going to base it in Dryad bark. Now for those thin little straps that are kind of hard to paint, make sure that your paint is just slightly watered down so that it's going to be easier to glide on. We are going to use Shabby Bone for the teeth themselves. You want to make sure that you're using a smaller brush and you want your paint just slightly watered down so that it's easier to glide on the teeth. Now there's also these little like bone skull things on the actual loincloth themselves, and I painted those in Shabby as well. Next, we are going to use Balthazar Gold, or I like to call it Balthazar Bronze, and we're just going to want to paint it just sparingly. This is going to help break up all of those metal bits, and I just put it on a few selected areas on the metal, just not too much. Now it's time to get it all blended in. We are going to use Agrax Earthshade. We want to paint the entire thing, everything, on the mini, all of it. And where it's too heavy, just use your brush and soak up some of it so that it doesn't leave those gross watermarks. Now it's time for highlights. We're gonna start off with the back. We're gonna mix equal parts Elysian Green with Agrax Earthshade. And this is gonna go ahead and give you that consistency that you need to build up highlights on the muscles. Now all we wanna do is just work on those protruding areas, and we wanna just build up highlights, so you're just gonna go over and over again until you get that desired color that you want. You wanna leave all of those creases alone. And we don't even need to do this on the front because we previously already highlighted, and if you did put it on there on a highlight area, it's not even gonna show. So we're just gonna leave that alone. We are now going to mix equal parts Shabby Bone with Elysian Green. We're gonna add some Agrax Earthshade to the mix. We want the consistency to be about the same as a contrast paint. And we're really gonna be focusing on those muscles. So instead of using a larger brush, we're gonna use a small, finer brush. And the muscles like on the front kind of would have lines stretching. So I just made little lines for the highlights and just kind of kept going like that on the muscles. And you're just gonna wanna build up the highlights. Now you wanna stay away from all of those little crease lines because we want that to be darker. Later on, we're gonna be adding dots to make it look even more like the Predator from the movie. Now for the dots, we're gonna use Castilian Green. And if that's not dark enough for you, you can always mix it with a little bit of Abaddon Black or Contrast Black Templar. Now you want your paint consistency to be like an ink-like substance, so add some water to the mix. And all you're gonna do is get a small brush, a nice fine pointy one, and you're just gonna add dots. Now I did some along that kind of top area, and then where those muscle creases kind of went. Remember we left them darker? That's exactly where they're gonna be kind of coming from. Now I didn't want to do too much, but I did do some around the collarbone, a little bit in the middle of the chest, some along the thighs, and then along that kind of ribbed areas along the side. You are now going to use a bright silver or storm hose silver. This is going to be a really nice contrast with that iron borders. We want to use a smaller brush, and we just want to use the very side of the brush. Now you're just going to want to tap it along all of the edges on the metal. Now this is going to make it kind of uneven. Now even on the edge of the sword, you're just going to tap it along unevenly with the side of a brush, and you'll let the brush do those highlights. You're gonna now water down that storm hose silver just slightly with some water until it's an ink-like substance. And you're gonna add light little scratches coming from the edges and some heavy scratches throughout the middle. Oh, and when it comes to the chains on the head, we're just gonna wanna highlight some of them, almost like a dry brush, but we wanna stay away from those black coils that we painted. So I still just used a smaller brush, hitting some of those areas. Now, one cannot simply paint an orc without adding rust. So we're gonna use Troll Slayer Orange. You wanna water this down significantly until it's like this watery, wash-like substance. And what you're gonna do is that you're just gonna circle with a small brush around those bolts. And since it's kind of watery, it's gonna want to set inside those little creased areas. I also did this along somewhere the metal armor plates would meet. I would just get the brush and I would just glaze it in there, making sure that orange is set in there. And then you can always reapply some more of that wash or kind of this Troll Slayer Orange wash in there to make it even darker. Now I did this pretty much all over, even on the chains on the head, but I did it sparingly in that area because I didn't want to overwhelm it. So I just did it selectively in a few areas. Now to make that leather really pop, we're gonna use Steel Legion Draft. Now you want to take off the excess paint off your brush using a paper towel. And we're just gonna focus along some of the edges in those protruding areas. You're just gonna wanna use the side of your brush and you just wanna tap it along all of those edges. I did this along the straps as well as the loincloth, just making sure I hit all those edges and all those protruding areas. Once you're all done with that, you want to water down the Steel Legion Draft just slightly until it's an ink-like substance. This is gonna be easier for your brush to glide on. And you're gonna do light scratches throughout the leather, and it's just gonna kind of help make it pop and look good. For the highlights on the coils on the head, we're gonna use Cantor Blue. Now you just wanna focus on the highlights. You wanna still leave some of that black area so you have some contrast. So the blue is just going to be the highlight. Now you may notice that mine's actually gray and I'm covering it with Cantor Blue, and I thought I would use Mechanica Standard Gray for the highlight, but then I changed my mind and used Cantor Blue, which I think looks way better, and it's really not necessary to put it in the Mechanica Standard Gray first. Now it's time to make glowy eyes. We're gonna start off with a pure white. You wanna water this down just slightly so it's gonna be easier to glaze onto those eyes. Now you wanna just do your absolute best, but as you're gonna see on mine, it's not gonna be perfect. It's just gonna be kind of a little bit jaggedy, but we're still gonna make it look good. We are now going to use the Pro Acryls Fluorescent Green. Now, if you don't have that, I would just use a watered down moot green. You want to make sure that there's barely any paint on your brush, so you're going to get a paper towel and wipe off that excess paint. And you're just going to paint the inside of the eye, and I also just kind of tapped it along that bottom area, painting this as well. And then on the very top, I just kind of tapped it along that top ridge area, but not too much. So it's mostly darker or that more green under here. But what if you wanted darker around that bottom eye, but still keeping it bright in the middle? We're gonna use Biltan Green. It's like that wash. We're gonna use a smaller brush, and you're just gonna have just a little bit on the brush, and you're just gonna tap it along that bottom area and let that wash soak up in that kind of sunken area in the eyes. And this is gonna make it that darker green, but still keeping that white. Now that's gonna kind of fix that mistake earlier on if you had trouble painting the eyes. For green blood, we're gonna start off with Caliban Green. This is gonna help it look a little bit more 3D later when we add the brighter green to it. So what we're gonna do is that you wanna water it down just slightly so it's easier to glaze on your mini. And you're just gonna add a little bit of a thicker line on the top and then have that go down. Now you're gonna have to add white in the middle of this, doing your best leaving that green on the side. So you wanna make sure that it's thick enough that you can do that. We are now gonna go back to the fluorescent green, and if you don't have that, I would just use a watered down moot green. And you're just gonna go over that white area that we just painted. Now, if you get some of it on the green, it doesn't really matter because it's pretty transparent. It was a tough fight, but we finally got it. After all, a predator orc is still just an orc. An easy day's work for a guardsman. What is that? Is that a predator spaceship? Is Yarrick in there? No! We didn't get there in time! We were so close! Remember, it's heresy not to like and subscribe to this video. And if you want even more content, check out my gaming channel at UNIQUE Ork Gaming. Bye!